All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining Danny and I here today.
Glad to be here.
We're happy that we're able to do this. Danny and I have put together videos in the past for our storage owners and operators, and we'd like to put one together today to discuss the capital markets. Where do we think we're going to be headed here if you had a crystal ball, which is obviously a loaded question, but nevertheless, what are you hearing from your side about what the next 6 months holds? How is the election going to impact anything?
Sure. Well, I think in this environment that we are today, which we're currently sitting in the middle of summer 2020, it's going to be very specific to geographics. I think depending on where you are in the country is going to highly depend on the rebound that people are going to see. Here in Texas, in certain areas, we're seeing a quicker rebound, people getting out, job creation, job rebounding, retail sales going up. But in certain areas, specifically in California, New York, Illinois, and certain markets like that, you're seeing a much slower rebound. And I think it's going to be more difficult for different types of real estate to attract capital.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would add on to that, Brandon, that what we are starting to see as time goes on through COVID is that you're starting to get a sense of what Sonny's saying, which is multifamily, industrial, data centers as well, self-storage. Those asset types are faring better. And so you're seeing capital start to diverge and chase those opportunities. Whereas on the retail and hospitality side, as Sonny mentioned, capital is very constrained. And
Right.
to the extent they are going to those opportunities, it's cost more and the leverage is less. So as time goes on and more clarity is being recognized with the operating statements and who's paying where and who's not, you're seeing capital move off the sidelines and go into those opportunities.
We were just talking earlier about some recent transactions that y'all have closed. Would you like to highlight anything in particular that y'all have done in the midst of all these uncharted waters that we're in?
Sure. I have one that's really unique, and I made a small joke to our team that I had a client that we had a grocery anchored shopping center. I had financed the deal about 2 years ago. He came back right during COVID and said one of his tenants wants to move out of the inline and build an Omni building out front. And so at the same time that I was going to get the loan increase to allow for the construction of a new building, I was simultaneously asking the lender for a deferment of mortgage because the retail tenants were suffering because of COVID. They were shut down. So I've never done that in the 23, 24 years I've been in this business, asking a lender on one hand, hey, we cannot pay the mortgage for a couple of months, but in addition, I would like you to increase your exposure to this asset and do a construction loan. And in that case, the lender was great, and they gave us the deferment we needed. They simultaneously committed to the construction loan, and my borrower client is now under construction, moving that tenant out into an Omni building. So that's an example of a deal that we just did here on the retail side. That's unique.
And on the self-storage, on the self-storage side, we're actually in the process of closing a construction loan right now in a northern suburb of DFW, where a very experienced self-storage operator is building out about a 300 unit self-storage property, and we think they're going to be very successful because it's a growth market. So what we're seeing in today's environment and what we've been closing over the last couple months and where we see things going is we're getting a lot of development loans done today, because typically those are recourse in nature, given that there's a completion guarantee and some sort of guarantees that are required until a stabilization. And those will get done because typically those are going to get delivered in 1 or maybe 2 years out. So hopefully we're past this COVID environment. And secondarily, we're also getting done permanent financing for product types like self-storage, industrial, multifamily today that have shown very strong collections.
And Duke, I think you had a multifamily deal you closed recently.
Yeah, I actually had a couple. One was a straightforward acquisition out in Killeen.
Mm-hmm.
The closing was actually during the middle of COVID. Terms did change from the lender, but they did not just completely pull out. So we worked with them through that. The rate actually went down as we saw pricing came in, but the amortization also came down. So net, it was a slightly higher mortgage payment, but the borrower is still happy to have a lender there at the end of the day that was willing to close with them.
So, Duke, you mentioned something. You mentioned the clean market.
Yes.
Okay, we have investors from all across the country who may not necessarily be familiar with that area, but it's a secondary market. I think we would consider that.
Agreed.
What kind of commentary can you provide about how lenders are treating? Sonny mentioned geographics. Let's keep it within the confines of Texas, and obviously you have a lot of experience just within the state. Certainly, what are lenders across all product types right now in light of COVID? How are they treating primary versus secondary versus tertiary? Is there a demonstrable difference in their attitude?
I'd say there's usually in times like these a flight to quality. So definitely more preference for the larger markets that are considered more stable. But with that said, those smaller secondary or tertiary markets still do get attention from their local regional lenders. And a lot of times you'll have local regional banks and credit unions come into the fold to kind of pick up or clean up where maybe other larger regional banks are starting to pull out of.
Okay.
As part of that flight to quality, it doesn't necessarily mean the asset type or the location. It also can mean sponsor.
Sure.
So if the sponsor's very strong, but he owns something in Killeen or he owns something in some other tertiary market, that will also get attention in this environment.
Okay.
And also in certain markets, you'll see an element of overbuilding or oversupply. So sometimes the tertiary markets actually perform sometimes a little bit better than the primary markets because there isn't much competition. So what we're looking at is what were collections pre-COVID, what were collections during COVID, and what the projections are going to be post-COVID. And a lot of times you'll see that in these secondary markets, collections are as strong, if not stronger, than some of the primary markets because of the oversupply.
That's interesting.